Hello there, this is Steve here in Sydney of the Lane Gnosis website truebluehealer.com, where in just 20 minutes you can get physical evidence of divine activation of your divine spark that you all carry around within you, and it's a marvellous discovery, and it turns you into what you really are intended to be, and that's why people often call this process being born again, because it introduces you to a whole new you that you have never met before. And it explains a whole lot of things about how misguided many people are, and how if you don't know what you are, then your perceptions of everything else are likely to be faulty too. Because that also means you don't know what everybody else is, you see. So it's good to get oneself grounded in facts and evidence and be empirical about it, and you can certainly do that at truebluehealer.com in just 20 minutes. And within a week or two you'll be getting some vivid messaging dreams, and ultimately you'll get physical signals of an extraordinary nature, very, very reliable signals, repeatable signals, and ultimately you'll get an internal mentoring voice like you've often heard or read about, say perhaps in biblical figures, that sort of thing. So now you don't have to do this. You can stay sleepwalking if you wish, with only half your potential working. That's okay. Wake up when you want to, okay? Because I know life can be a wonderful dream. So, I'm just going to talk today about, in sort of general, about the election of Donald Trump. One of the most striking things has been how Sydney media, who absolutely copy North American mainstream media, which was, of course, in bed with the White House in an organised crime attempt to stop Trump ever being elected. The organised crime went as far as Podesta editing newspaper articles for the Washington Post, Washington Times, and all that sort of stuff. Wolf Blitzer was asking for the hardest questions possible so he could do a hit job on Donald Trump to stop him ever getting to be a president, you see. And there was a whole lot of other cheating and stuff going on with voting machines that didn't work, that sort of thing. I don't know why they don't just ban electronic voting. Just stop it. Make it impossible. It cuts out a lot of possibility for cheating. But a fascinating thing is that Sydney newspapers, Sydney journalists read mainstream American news, which is utterly corrupt and run like organised crime. They believe it. And today's Sydney mainstream newspapers, the journalists are almost gobsmacked. They're saying, how could we have got it so wrong? How could we, the intellectual people with the big vocabularies, the thought leaders, the conversation leaders, the daily journalists, that set the dialogue for every daytime TV show, we got it all wrong. Because they kept saying exactly what CNN was saying, that no matter what happens to Hillary Clinton, she seems to just shrug off every controversy and stride on through the polls, which were all completely false, done by oversampling, of course. We all know about that now, don't we? They just sample twice as many Democrats to get the right numbers. That's if they actually sample anyone at all or just make up the results they want. But those obviously faked polls are believed entirely by Sydney mainstream media, and I'm very pleased to see that the left-wing leading thought leaders in Sydney, running our newspaper journalism and all that, they're utterly gobsmacked that they, of all people, could be wrong. They had it all down to Hillary Clinton all the way. It is... Interestingly enough, they never talked about WikiLeaks either in Sydney newspapers, which mirrored precisely what the mainstream media in the US was doing. So our journalists follow other people's journalists, and I would imagine European and British journalists goes round in a big circle, because there's really only about, 10 people own all the world's newspapers or something, and they're all seriously wrong, and they've done themselves serious discreditation. I don't know if mainstream media will ever recover from this. They were a vital plank of the New World Order to bring a Gulag archipelago type situation on the whole planet and turn it into a giant prison camp. The mainstream media was all about mind control, thought control, and it's been so utterly discredited that it's reported by Alex Jones that the mainstream television networks in America, their profits are down by 97%. It seems an outrageously big figure. They're practically going out of business with no advertising revenue because the advertisers have woken up to the fact that nobody's watching them anymore. And that will turn the mainstream media networks into $1 trillion heap of junk. I think I've said that before. I'm very happy to see this. And Donald Trump has said they're not going to get any free interviews or free videos or free answers to any questions from the White House. He's going to leave them out in the cold, and he's only going to talk to alternative media and a few trustworthy media outlets who do try to stay near the truth. So what a stupendous, unexpected revolution in world thinking. Truly amazing this is. On economics, it is rumoured that, I found a few articles about this, that Donald Trump wants to slap a 50% import duty on Chinese goods coming into North America because he says they're currency manipulators, and that's been said for 20, 30 years by a lot of people who know what they're talking about. And the New World Order just left all that in place. So jobs were going to China, factories are moving out. Detroit car making has gone over the border to Mexico. He's going to hit them with a tax too, 35% tax on American cars built in Mexico. So they might be moving back to Detroit to re-employ the people that they sacked with such glee when they went to China and Mexico. So that's a radical change and a radical offensive against the New World Order, and they're not going to get their own way again, it would seem. Not for a long time yet, because Marxist thinking, which is what the Clinton party is all about, the Clinton-Bush party, has been utterly discredited and may be discredited for generations. I really can't see common sense letting go now that the electorate sees they've still got it. A lot of seeming shy voters come out of the woodwork who've never voted before and registered that they want common sense to rule America, and that will spread to the Western world. And for the same reason, Merkel will be thrown from office soon and replaced by Trump-like figures using empirical thinking based on evidence and common sense, which has been absolutely buried under Marxist alternative universe theory. Marxists always seem to live in a world of their own making and try to project it onto everybody else, trying to tell us that social issues like women's rights are more important than living standard. I mean, if your house is rusting out, you can't afford a car, you haven't got a job, do women's rights really matter to you? Do, microaggressions against transsexual Eskimos really matter when your house is falling down around you and you can't get a job and you're living on food stamps, for goodness sake? The difference between what we call in the Anglo world is Liberal and Labor, Democrat and Republican, is even in the 19th century it was noticed that the Conservative Party in Britain cared more about boosting living standard, assuming that everything else people wanted to do would come naturally. They would just do what they could do with available rising living standard. Whereas the Labor Party in Britain got all tangled up with moral issues which are often not really connected to living standard very much. Certainly they labour that way too much, and it's become a Marxist game now. It looks like the British Labor Party has always been a Jewish creation, so it's always been Marxist in intent, and there's still no Marxist nation in the world that outperforms a capitalist nation. There isn't one. Think about that. I'm much taken by what I used to think were people called pseudo-skeptics, were people who couldn't join the dots, couldn't think empirically. By that I mean joining the dots and forming an opinion of your own from, say, you might read 2 newspaper articles. Someone will then ask you, what do you think about that politician? And you'll say, well, I saw on the Times they said this, and then another paper they said that, and I've always suspected he'd be caught out sooner or later, and certainly, once again, he's been caught, as I always suspected. He's got his hand in the till, as usual. Right, so, now what you've just done there to a question, while you're walking about, while you're out having a cup of tea with somebody, you just put an opinion together, and it's your own. Now, it turns out a lot of people can't seem to do that. I thought it was maybe 5% of the world or something, but I'm beginning to think it's a lot more than that. I'm thinking it's more like 25% of the world, because I've seen so many frightening indications that people who vote left-wing, that's people who are seized by the concept of Marxism while their brain's only three-quarters developed, and that prevents their brain developing any further to include empiricism and common sense. They remain that way for the rest of their life. It's very strange, hard to understand how you can be so totally possessed by a political idea which gives you about a dozen maxims to explain everything. So you don't have to think, you don't have to join dots, you don't have to do anything difficult or hard, you just call people names for the rest of your life. Universities have been turning out lots of these people. So I used to think, after much research and many years discussing this with other people, that maybe 5% of the world was unable to join the dots and form an opinion. And it was a rare thing, and it was often coupled with Asperger's. I thought that many militant atheists are Asperger's, and I include them in their inability to actually put an opinion together like a normal person can. So I was surprised to meet a fellow called Mark Dice, who's on YouTube, and he's a very entertaining fellow, a political commentator, insightful political comments he makes on everything going on in the election. And previous to that, he's written about 4 books on the Illuminati, where he's looked at all the connections and laid them out for you between groups, power groups, that sort of thing, who's really in charge, the deep state and all that business. He's also got a wonderful sense of humour, and he's good at impersonating a television presenter. And it is distressing to watch how many people he can find who seem to have an early onset type of dementia. That is, I'm sure you know that people with dementia who can't recognise faces and can't remember who they met half an hour ago greet people as if they're strangers with effusiveness and warmth. Well, guess what? It's not only senior dementia people who do that. There's a lot of young people do it too, suggesting that their brains never fully mature. And Mark Dice just stops people in the street with a microphone and a camera, and he just asks people absurd questions. He puts an absurd proposal to them, and it would seem, although I suppose he's being selective, getting the goofiest ones to entertain us, but he finds 75-80% of the people he stops on this pier will agree to any absurd explanation with considerable conversational enthusiasm. So he asks people to sign the most ridiculous petitions, including things like, "I am a certified moron," because they don't actually read that. People agree to sign a petition, and they do in front of the camera, for compulsory euthanasia to cut down the costs of looking after old people. And lots of people sign for it, even though they're condemning their own parents to death. So what are these people actually doing, these young people that he stops walking down the pier wearing flip-flops and a towel over their shoulder, etc.? They are confabulating like people do with dementia. They're going through all the motions of being warm and charming and effusive and enthusiastic in the conversation. They are mouthing back positive things to the speaker, but they have no grasp whatsoever of the absurd proposition being put to them. So it looks to me that there's a lot more of these people about from what Mark Dice is finding. You can just say, what do you think of ridiculous things he'll say to people, and people agree. Occasionally someone says, "No, you're wrong. How could you say that?" But that seems to be a rarity. For every one person that knows that it's a game, that it's a joke, there's 5 or 6 people who'll say, "I never knew that." They're so gullible they believe anything because they can't make up their own opinions. That's the problem. They have a type of dementia. They are emotionally and intellectually retarded. They can't join dots to form their own opinions. That's supposed to happen with maturation hormones around age 12, 13, 14, you see. Not everyone's brain is successfully re-architected into adulthood. So a lot of people are physically large, they walk about, they drive cars, they operate computers, but their brains can be intellectually and emotionally about 8 or 9 years old. And their brain's still working in tape recorder mode, which means that they just believe everything they're told because they don't know anything else. That's one of the attributes of children, which changes around age 12, 13, when they start to assert themselves and start saying things like, well, even if that's true, I'm not going to believe it, I'm not going to run with it because it offends me, right? That's the beginning of personality developing in a person. If they continue later in life to go along with anything put to them, any proposition, they've never reached that 13-year-old maturity mark where they start forming their own version of reality, their own personal narrative of what's going on. And that is the problem. There seems to be a lot of these youthful dementia patients walking about, and the shame of it is they're allowed to vote. And they basically seem to be most responsive to other people thinking for them using slogans, catch cries like the Marxists do, where you call everybody racist, homophobe, xenophobe, misogynist, etc. And that enables people to have a ready answer if you can't hold up your end of a conversation. It sounds like you're intelligent, you know a few big words, but what you're really doing is just mouthing off meaningless maxims. And that's why I think they're used so inappropriately, where, for example, people talk about Islam, and anyone who doesn't like that, such as Democrats, will call them racist over and over again, even though Islam is not a race, and I've seen that written down 100,000 times. Yet still I hear people saying it in video, racist, racist, racist. Islam is not a race, and yet they don't understand the fact that Islam is not a race. So these people are suffering youth onset dementia. It's that their brains never mature fully intellectually and emotionally, and they remain retarded all of their life as far as I can tell. Now, our elites seem to be these people dressed up as adults wearing marvellous suits and having lovely speaking voices on the TV screen, that sort of thing. Yet we've just had our elites in Australia shaken to the core by the unexpected victory of Trump over Hillary Clinton. We have a leftist Prime Minister. He actually started out as a union organiser, wanted to be one, and then got a law degree and beat MI6 in a court case, and he was then adopted by the elites, became a merchant banker, and finally he became Prime Minister of Australia. Yet he still has leftist leanings. He believes in equality no matter what, but he's born to rule, of course, because he's got the big vocabulary and the big words and the education. He's a Rhodes Scholar, you see. And when it was announced finally on the television that Trump had won, our Australian Prime Minister, Malcolm Turnbull, looked so grim, it was like he was announcing the attack on Pearl Harbor. He actually told Australians to, don't worry, stay calm, just hang on and stay calm. The same thing happened with Barry Cassidy, a noted Australian political commentator who, he's on Sunday mornings and he does an analysis of what's in the news. And Barry Cassidy, I always like listening to him. He's got nice, fluid, flowing speech, the usual trap that we all fall into. Oh, isn't he clever? Isn't he verbally adroit? Lovely to listen to. But it turns out he was calling the election for Hillary Clinton full well believing that the mainstream media polls putting Hillary out in front no matter what, he believed they were all true. It never occurred to him that the entire mainstream media could be operated and edited by the Clinton camp. The whole Clinton campaign was operating the entire American media. And our Australian journalists were lapping it up. And Barry Cassidy was calling the election for Hillary Clinton till the last minute. And he looked devastated on the television. He was devastated. Journalists are talking about it today. how so many ebulliently confident commentators have been stopped in their tracks by the barbarian winning the election, for goodness sake. That's a word used in one of the papers. He's perceived as a barbarian by the elites in Australia. And isn't that just so narcissistic? Goodness gracious. So the Trump is another Brexit thing echoing around the world, and it's likely to produce more Trumps turning up in Germany, France. A Trump's necessary in England, and I only regret that Nigel Farage can't be Prime Minister. Apparently he's only got a micro party permanently kept out of power by two conservative and pseudo-conservative parties, and they're both operated by Zionists, and nobody in the elites in England is interested in Brexit. So it looks like a Trump figure is necessary. Maybe we should mount some kind of reality TV show to find one based on what Donald Trump used to do. Oh, goodness gracious. And there's a strange immigration matter come up. Australia's famous for its near watertight, near absolutely perfect immigration system to keep boat people out. Now that's so we mentioned a lot in Europe, in the Euro Parliament, that sort of thing. As a reference, as a standard, why can't we copy Australia? But in the dying days of the Obama administration, our leftist Prime Minister, Malcolm Turnbull, has organised some kind of refugee swap with Barack Obama. And it's very strange. It's a few hundred people from the island of Nauru who have been classified as genuine refugees are going to be swapped. They're going to go to America, and we're going to get, apparently the deal goes, we're going to get some refugees certified in America as genuine, sent to our island of Nauru, and may end up in Australia. So the net result is nothing. It seems to be an exercise in quid pro quo and leftist machinations behind the scenes. It won't be getting world press. It won't be getting world press at all. This is not going to be in the mainstream media. But it's mighty peculiar that even though the Donald Trump's much publicised resistance to unfettered migration, that Barack Obama hasn't backed off on that at all. He's still trying to cram people into America and keep refugees circulating between countries, which just seems to be all froth and bubble about nothing. We really can't have billions of people flooding into the Western world. Common sense tells us that, and that's why Donald Trump is building the wall. It's called a common sense idea. Now, about the wall. Everyone's saying he can't pay for it and he can't make the Mexicans pay for it. Well, he can. And guess what? I found one video clip where a politician was saying the money's already allocated to build that wall. It was allocated by George W. Bush. It's sitting waiting. George W. Bush just forgot to build the wall. So I'll also tell you there's a wall on the southern border of Mexico. Did you know that? So all the people opposed to the northern Mexico border wall are not looking at common sense and reality. Walls have been built throughout history to keep invaders out. Hadrian's Wall, the Great Wall of China. Walls work, especially if they're completed and manned and barricaded. They cost a lot of money, but walls do work. And already the influx of Mexican refugees trying to get into America has dropped off because they know they're not going to make it. An absolute disgrace was the treasonous behaviour of Barack Obama, who said that any stranger who votes in America gets citizenship. He says if you tick a box on a voting form, you're a citizen. That's the Commander-in-Chief, the so-called upholder of the Constitution, telling anyone and his dog they can vote. What does that say to all the registered voters and the tax-paying citizens of that country who see their living standard being shot out from under them? Which brings us to the question of pardoning people for all their gross criminality. I don't know if Barack Obama is going to pardon Hillary Clinton and all the people in the Department of Justice and the top of the power pyramid in the FBI and other government departments that have completely corrupted and hijacked the government of America and running it like organised crime. He wants to just do some kind of a pardon, maybe. It's been kicked around. I don't know if he can pardon himself. But even if he did pardon Hillary Clinton, that wouldn't stop all the investigations. They're going to go to the last email. Investigation's going to go to the last who said what to who at what time date stamp for years afterwards. So a pardon by Obama would really be an admission of guilt, wouldn't it? Why does she need a pardon if she's done everything above board? The Clinton Foundation's got, 500 breaches of ethics, for goodness sake. Billions of dollars coming in from foreign countries, billions of dollars stolen. And I don't know if Clinton can pardon a foundation which hasn't been charged with anything yet. And Eric Braverman is the CEO of the Clinton Foundation, who has disappeared into a Russian embassy and hasn't been seen since, has not been heard of. But he knew so much about the Clinton Foundation, he feared for his very life, it seems, because he knew about the history of 114 dead people buried behind the Clinton Foundation. So there's a lot of stuff to be uncovered, and pardons or not, there'll be years of research done by investigative bodies. It's a treasure trove of historicity to be dug up, isn't it? It's a wonderful treasure trove, like modern day archaeology. And I don't know if Clinton and Obama need passports to leave the country, but I'd be trying to cancel their passports if I was Donald Trump. Could the FBI do it in advance? I don't know. Could Obama be impeached even in the last few weeks of his term? I would like to see that. There have been numerous attempts to impeach him, by the way. He's broken the rules many, many times, but the US Congress never got their act together to actually function like a lawmaking and law-enforcing body because they were so totally corrupted. What do you expect if you've got corruption at the top of the power pyramid? You expect the parliamentary branch to be corrupt as well. And so it was effectively neutralised. An amazing world we live in, but this is a wonderful revolution we're having, starting in America, triggered by Brexit and ricocheting around the world. And there's signs here in Australia that the elites here are shaken to the core as well. And there's been by-elections recently where there's been 30% swings against the government, all right? That's the same kind of unrest of the silent majority that's happening all over the Western world. We've had enough of this. We want some empiricism and common sense to take us back to the world we used to have, which is attainable. It is attainable. It's not a lost cause. It can be done with common sense. My answer is relocalisation and get rid of the United Nations. We don't need them. I recently saw the United Nations, WHO, the World Health Organisation, in India. They're headquartered there. Somebody went there from Rebel Media in Canada and just started asking them questions, and they were treated with utter disdain, like, why should we talk to the media? Who are you? You're a nobody. You haven't even got an appointment. We're going to have a closed-door meeting and make rules that affect the world for the next 30 or 40 years, and we're not going to tell you about it because we are just like the Brussels EU commissioners on twice the salary of the British Prime Minister and answerable to nobody. So the UN is another version of Brussels, and countries need to pull out of the United Nations, and if you want an international body, start again. But I would say relocalisation and doing it all again and getting it better and not allowing foreign nations to direct your policies domestically. That's very important. Okay, that's my advice. Relocalisation via common sense and empirical thinking is the way to go.